Welcome to Contemporary Black Voices, where we take on the most pressing issues affecting Black America. I am your host, Dr. Sharon Michael Chadwell, and with me today are New York Times bestseller Caleb Alexander, community activist and entrepreneur Chris Dawkins. Our fourth panelist, author and screenwriter Fred Williams, is not with us today, yet we miss him within the Black Video Network family. Lately, students at institutions of higher learning have been front and center concerning U.S. policies and events that could affect their lives. Historically, there have been many student protests on university campuses here and around the world. In 1970, students at Kent State University protested the U.S. involvement in Vietnam and Cambodia. In 1985, thousands of students at the University of California, Berkeley protested the university's business ties with apartheid South Africa. In 2024, across the United States, pro-Palestinian protests have erupted on U.S. college campuses, with more than 40 campuses participating in demonstrations and encampments. These protesters advocate for a ceasefire in Gaza and the divestment of their institutions from companies with ties to Israel. At Princeton University, one student said, despite the systemic repression of pro-Palestinian voices, students will continue to stand their ground. Now, what is interesting about all of this, there have been no reported pro-Palestinian protests on the HBCUs. So let's talk about it. Okay, guys, what are your thoughts?
Let me give some context to this. First of all, nobody is anti-Semitism, and nobody, I don't think, is really totally anti-Israel. What the protest is about the unnecessary killing of people in Gaza and how that's been going. And that's what I think is mostly the protest. And I think it's a little bit not correct, even though some of the protesters do say anti-Israel. The real reason is they're against the killing the way it's going right now. And I think that needs to be said, because what's happening is you have different states, which you pointed out to me, as well as 38 states have already said to be against protests for Israel and Israel and Jewish communities.
Mm-hmm. And I think also to add a little bit more to that context, there's a difference between being against Israel and against the Jewish people. You know what I mean? And so because you have Jewish people that are involved in these protests, mm-hmm. who are also protesting the Israeli government's actions. You know what I mean? So just to add even more context to that, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like anti-Semitism is just the blunt tool that they use to stifle any kind of dissent.
And to go one step further from that, there's a growing number. It was already huge, but even growing even more of people who are against Netanyahu, mm-hmm. who's carrying this out, and they want him gone or erased from mm-hmm. from the Israeli government.
Oh yeah, he was in trouble before all this started.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so even before the Hamas attacks, he was on his way out the door. They want him gone anyway.
Right.
And after the attacks, they called it a major intelligence failure, and they said that as soon as it's over with, there's going to be a reckoning. So he has an incentive to extend this as long as possible. You know,
to keep him his own self in power.
There's a video out of him saying that once they get the Israelis free, they want to go to Africa and start basically recolonizing Africa.
Yeah. Somebody needs to set him down and put in Black Hawk Down and just put it on replay. let him understand how that's going to work out for him.
The most important thing that I see as far as protests, especially in America, is that America was built on protest.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to talk,
Tea Party was one.
Yeah, and to be able to talk about now, to be against protest, I see, and I've sounded the alarm a number of times. America is changing, And America is changing. When you take one of the fundamental constitutional rights of free speech and to be able to protest and take that out of what you can do in America, that's a very fundamental right that they are challenging. So I'm adamantly opposed to not allowing people to protest.
There's these states, to include Texas, that want to suppress mass protests, and these are peaceful protests that we're seeing from these students. That's just another means of controlling freedom of speech. That's all they're trying to do. And so these students are not going to be putting up with it anymore.
And they howled like children when Trump was kicked off of Twitter or when he was kicked off of Facebook. Then they were pro free speech. You know what I mean? They went and founded Truth Social, and they talked about freedom and all kinds of stuff. When they howled like I almost, but you know, but now all of a sudden they want to stifle free speech when it's speech that they don't like or speech that they don't agree with. And so to me, the hypocrisy is what gets me, because these are the same people who protested and talk about Jews will not replace us, the same tiki torch marchers, the same people that are in bed with neo-Nazis and right-wing parties, and same people that are in bed with David Duke and the KKK are now all of a sudden they're the lovers of Jewish people. You know what I mean? So it's just hypocrisy. My other point is this: so if you don't send what kind of kids do you want to have? Do you want kids that are passionate, that are engaged, that are civic-minded, and kids who are vocal, kids who speak out against what they perceive as an injustice? Are those the kind of kids that you want? And I would say yes. You know,
yes.
Those are the kind of kids that you want. That's why we send them to college. You know what I mean? To become engaged, to become civic-minded, to learn, to expand, to grow. And so I think the parents of these kids that are out there protesting, they're getting their money's worth.
That is one of the things that the socialization of going to college is all about.
You know, and the teachers, a lot of the faculty now of on these campuses are surrounding these encampments, especially.
I saw that.
And protecting those kids. Yeah. They're protecting them.
There was an image, I think I reposted it, where I think it was 3 colleges that are all joined together protesting at George Washington. So I imagine it's probably George Washington, Georgetown, and not Howard, but there are 3 DC universities that have kind of banded together, and the professors from those universities are kind of surrounded those students to protect them from the police. And that's a beautiful thing. I mean, hey, my hats are off to those professors, to those teachers who are out there, who are on the front line, who are protecting those kids. And a lot of those professors don't have tenure. You know what I mean? So they're putting it on the line.
Let me make a mention about protests. Protests in America, especially when you look at Kent State and Ohio State especially, and what happened in the 60s.
UT Austin.
UT Austin's in the 60s and the 70s. When you had that protest, that's how and what made the Vietnam War stop. When you had those kids who, the Congress people were sending their kids to college and their kids were getting killed, they stopped the war. They also stopped the draft because they wanted to make sure that their kids did not go to the war and became an all-volunteer war. So some of the things that we're seeing today is a result of what those kids did at that time.
Yeah, you know, during our next segment, what I want to talk about is the profile of these college protesters. So when we come back, I'm going to lead off with who is the college protesters? Who are these students? And I think you'd be surprised at what I'm going to say.
Okay. And then after that, let's get to the HBCUs and where they're at. Because I want to know where they're at. I kind of have my suspicions of why they're so silent. And it starts with money and it ends with money.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back.